Welcome to eXplore, coming to you from the Tidemark Theater. My guest is Sara Lopez Assu, the new Executive Director for the Campbell River Art Gallery. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're new, so let's find out all about Sara. So give us a little bit of the 411 on who Sara is.
The elevator pitch. So I am born and raised in Montreal.
Oh.
And I met Sonny, my husband, about 15 years ago and managed to convince him to move to Montreal, where we started our family, got married, all that good stuff. Okay. He lasted about 5 years. He was a fish out of water. Those Montreal winters are unforgiving.
They are.
So yeah, we ended up moving back to the West Coast about 5 years ago. We started off on the mainland, and then 4 years ago now we moved to Campbell River. Just because Sonny and we only had the one daughter at the time, wanted to connect a little bit more with their Kwakwaka'wakw culture, their family, extended family relations, just be in their territory. And so, yeah, we made the move all the way from Montreal to Campbell River, and been here happily for the last 4 years.
Now, Montreal has one of the most dynamic art fields in probably all of Canada. Do you miss that?
I do. And, you know, the main thing I tell people when they ask me, oh, don't you miss it? Or why on earth would you give that up to move to a smaller community like Campbell River? It was really just a matter of timing, you know. Right. Had it been 5 years sooner, I probably wouldn't have been ready. Right. But we were at a place in our life where, you know, we had one kid, we wanted more, I wanted a dog, a yard, a garden, all that good stuff. And so those things started to weigh in the balance. And ultimately, you know, that kind of diversity exists everywhere. You just have to maybe work a little bit harder at getting to it when you are in a place like Campbell River. But there's opportunities still. They may just not be as close and as numerous. Right. Yeah.
What's the one thing growing up in Montreal, surrounded by all of that art and music and culture, what is your takeaway? What's the one thing that has really stuck with you as a human being?
Just that art should be accessible. Music, culture, it all is accessible. It's in how it's often presented that creates these barriers. Right. But having lived in a place where it's just omnipresent, it's everywhere. I mean, Montreal's got one of the most incredible mural festivals, for example. And so all you need to do is simply just walk down the street and you're seeing incredible art, some fascinating messages, individuals who just are using that platform to share art, to share culture, to share their own experience. And so that's my biggest takeaway is you know, art can be everywhere and it should be everywhere and it should be accessible because it's got so much to give in terms of helping us understand the world, helping us understand what's going on and our own place in it and how we can instill change or how we can participate in what's going on in the bigger picture.
Right. The thread of art through community, you grew up with it in Montreal. How do you see that now that you're in Campbell River? It's a much different scenario here in Campbell River. We have art, but it's not the same level of accessibility. So how in Campbell River can you see us moving forward and breaking down some of those barriers?
I mean, I'd love to see a concerted effort to really enhance our public art here. I think that those are wonderful opportunities to really engage with people who wouldn't otherwise step foot in an art gallery because they feel intimidated and those barriers exist psychologically for them.
Right.
Once you start putting art in the public sphere, then that's where people who wouldn't necessarily choose to engage in art kind of are confronted by it in
Right.
good ways, sometimes in challenging ways, and that's okay too. So that's somewhere where I'd love to see some growth, because it's definitely an opportunity here. And similarly, it's an opportunity for the rest of the North Island, right? Which we also have a mandate to serve. So seeing that more in the public sphere, I think, would definitely help increase the public's awareness of art and of the conversations that can go on surrounding art.
When you had your first child, how did that shift your perspective around viewing art or producing art or engaging with art?
It's funny, I think Lily must have been about 3 months old when we brought her to her first art show. And while having grown up in Montreal, I was always surrounded by so much art and culture. Now as a parent, bringing this tiny little tot to these art shows and seeing her grow up essentially in a variety of different galleries and museums and spaces where Sunny shows his work, we're always going as a family. And seeing how comfortable she is in those spaces, how she's now able to identify what she likes and she doesn't like, and maybe even express why. I think that's so important. She's now 8.
8, okay.
So yeah, I thought that was amazing to watch, right? Because while I had been exposed to it, it was never in that sort of intimacy of really truly being able to relate to it. And then on the flip side, I did work for 8 years in education at Concordia University, and and so many of my conversations with students, Concordia's got a phenomenal fine arts faculty, and so a lot of students come to Concordia for their fine arts, and obviously the parents, you know, would come and knock on my door or send me an email and say, well, my kid wants to do art, but, you know, maybe they can like do a science degree with a minor in art, because what kind of job are they going to have?
Right.
And I'm now able to encourage my own daughter, but certainly some of those students too, to say it's possible. It's completely possible to have a career in the arts. It's just you have to work at it just like you would have to work at it for a career in biology.
Right.
So being able to offer that to our kids now, this knowledge that truly art is accessible, a career in art is accessible. You just have to, you know, work at it, follow that.
Now, you mentioned that you taught at Concordia. What is your own scholastic background? What path did you follow?
So I didn't teach at Concordia. I was a recruitment officer.
Oh, okay.
So I worked with almost kind of like a guidance counselor for prospective university students. My educational background is in commerce and in urban planning. So I'm an urban planner by training. I've never worked in urban planning per se. I just kind of, forged my own path after university elsewhere.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That seems to be a common theme amongst people that end up in the arts. They start out with something else and they end up in a completely different path, but somehow it's a little bit related, because I would think that urban planning we would like to see more art in the community, out and about the community. And if you had a background in urban planning, you might be able to figure out where best to put that art. And how to engage with the local planners in developing that plan.
Absolutely, and that was brought up in my interview even, of just, you know, I I am more aware of the intricacies of working with cities because of my training in urban planning. A lot of urban planning, and what I loved about the program, is the community building aspect. And that's something that I've brought in all of my positions and throughout my career. I've kept certainly those teachings of how to build community, how to engage community, because I know from the training that I received as a planner that that can have incredible ripple effects, both economically, both culturally, attracting diversity. Once you have that strong community engagement, it's limitless, really.
Awesome. Yeah. Now we're going to take a short break. I just want to remind everybody what they're listening to. You're listening to and/or watching eXplore, coming to you from the Tidemark Theatre. And I do say watching and listening because this is both a video television show as well as a podcast, so people can download it and take it with them on their walk. We will be right back right after this short break. Welcome back to eXplore. My guest today is Sara Lopez Assu, the new executive director for the Campbell River Art Gallery. How are you settling in?
Oh, I think I'm getting my sea legs under me now. I've been there since August 1st. And, in many places, August is a quiet month. In an art gallery where you're sort of prepping all of your September shows and programming, back to school and grants, August is a busy month. So it's trial by fire.
And in the middle of a global pandemic.
Oh, no big deal. And now apocalyptic fires, apparently. It's been an interesting landscape to start a new job in, that's for sure.
So let's talk about the first set of shows. So what's coming up first?
Oh, it's exciting. So September 24th opens Sugarbush Shrapnel by Olivia Wheatung. So Olivia is a Anishinaabe artist from the Chemung Lake region in Ontario.
Okay.
And her work really explores a lot of concepts surrounding traditional knowledge and how that knowledge is transferred through generations. But then it also brings in the idea that through climate change and ecological changes, that knowledge transfer then becomes threatened, or it needs to shift and adjust because the means by which that transfer was happening may not exist anymore. Okay. And so it's a show that really kind of encompasses both Indigenous knowledge, but also environmentalism in a way. So we're super excited to be hosting that exhibit. Again, it falls in line with the art gallery's mandate to give voice to underrepresented voices. And so having an artist like Olivia here is amazing.
Now, will she still be able to give a talk to a select number of people, or are you going to do a virtual presentation? How are you going to approach it?
So that's where our pivot had to happen. Obviously, travel sort of stopped. Right. And just to ensure everyone's safety and comfort as well. So we've moved a lot of our programming to online. And so we will have a virtual talk, much like we did for our exhibit that ran through the summer. So it was a Zoom talk where people could sort of hear the artist speak and then ask some questions. Right. We certainly have a curatorial talk that is scheduled. Some of those will still be able to happen within the gallery. We're just having to invite people to register so that we can cap the number of participants. But that physical touch point is still important, especially when it comes to experiencing art. That said, we really had fun with our programming for this show. So we've got an Indigenous weaver who's coming and who's going to teach some cedar weaving. With the hopes of doing it in Spirit Square.
Yeah.
So that'll be nice, outdoors, weather permitting, and with a smaller group of people. Tying in the environmental side, we have Corey Cliff, who is one of the coastal watchmen for the Weewakam Nation.
Okay.
And he's been involved in the estuary restoration project. And and his approach has really taken on the 7th-generation approach and some traditional teachings to inform the restoration initiatives that they're doing. And so we outfitted him with a GoPro, and he's going around and going to give us a tour with his niece kind of following along, and he's going to explain some of the project, explain some of the initiatives, talk a little bit about her hereditary responsibilities as an Indigenous person from this land to protect the land. And so that video series is going to be made available, and with it we're doing some programming for kids and families to then do on their own, but go and visit the estuary and witness some of these things that Corey's talking about. So that'll be really exciting.
Now, how long does the exhibit stay up?
It goes all the way until mid-November, at which point we'll close for our annual artisan market, whatever that looks like this year. But yeah, so people can come and enjoy it in our space until November. We'll also be doing a 3D tour of the exhibit, which will be available on our website. So again, serving sort of our North Island community who may not be coming down as frequently, but then also anyone who's uncomfortable coming into the space, you know, who's too at risk to be going into public spaces, or someone who just wants to have a look at the exhibit prior to choosing to come into the space. They'll be able to tour it virtually, which is really exciting. So there are some silver linings to this pandemic.
Now, a couple of years ago, I happened to be down in San Diego, and I went through Balboa Park. And at Balboa Park, they have, I think it's 16 individual museums, and each one focuses on a different thing. So one is aerospace, one is automotive, one is graphic design, one is photography, and one is actually the art gallery of San Diego. It's 4 floors, and the art is gathered from all over the world. And it's set up where it's a downloadable app, and then it takes you through all of the collections using the app. And you can either do it while you're there, or you can just keep the app on your phone and do a virtual tour from somewhere in the world. So I'm sure that there's some local tech hotshots that would love to take a stab at that for the art gallery.
That would be amazing. Yes, send them my way. But yeah, no, for now, I mean, and that's our challenge right now, is figuring out how can we really use these opportunities that technology allows us, and leverage those digital spaces to better serve our community and to get art out there, since people can't necessarily come and experience it in person.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when you first arrived in August and you got in and you got to meet your team and you guys started sitting around the table to do some brainstorming, socially distanced, of course, what was that like for you, understanding who the new team was and what was already planned that you didn't have any real role in choosing that, and how that's going to transition into your own vision down the road?
Well, in terms of exhibit planning, I guess luckily, we plan many years ahead of time. And so I kind of walked in with an exhibit schedule set, with a lot of the funding already available because the exhibit schedule was set and the grants had already been written and approved. And so that did make my life a little bit easier, in that I sort of just then needed to, the real brainstorming was in terms of how do we now engage with the community? How do we get the word out? How do we get people coming through and actually appreciating this amazing artwork that we took so much trouble to bring here.
Right.
So that's where the fun sort of happened, and that's where I was able to leverage some of my own community connections to make sure that we had a good array of opportunities for people to participate. My own interest in community building, my own knowledge of child development, in which I worked for a little while, to sort of see, okay, what can we develop in terms of programming?
Right.
So that's where I was able to have some fun with the team.
Okay.
And then otherwise, and that was clear from the board too, that what they were looking for was truly some leadership and some strong communications outwards as
Right.
well.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what I've just been focused on, and letting the staff who are already in place thrive and excel in what they were already doing anyway. So,
Yes.
I'm just there to kind of cheerlead them and say, yes, keep going. This is amazing. Let's
Yeah.
see how I can fluff it up. So yes, I'm the official fluffer upper these days, but that's okay. And really, at the end of the day, I'm not a curator, and we have an incredibly qualified curator, Janelle,
Yes.
in our space. And so as long as I'm supporting her in what she wants to bring and what she wants to do,
Yeah.
then, my role is done.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. And you have started in the middle of a global pandemic. Thankfully, the exhibits for the next couple months were already in place, but you really had to pivot out of the gate and figure out the engagement. What was the most challenging piece for you about that?
I mean, I think it's the very principle of an art gallery is to bring people in. And so it's figuring out, okay, we can't bring people in. What can we do then? And so, a great example is, especially as we now enter this new school year,
Yes.
one of our most appreciated programs, and one that's incredibly valuable to even just our mandate, is to bring kids, school groups, into our space. And so now, in looking at what the school year is looking like, it's unlikely that field trips are going to be happening, especially to closed spaces. So we're quickly having to think about, okay, well, what can we do to still get those kids thinking about art? We produced an edu-kit last year that unfortunately got caught up in the school closures, and so wasn't fully able to get delivered.
Okay.
And that's on contemporary Indigenous art. So super interesting, super relevant and timely.
Right.
So we're just finding different ways to get the word out there, get the art out there. We will now visit potentially. How can we also support families who are homeschooling right now? They're certainly looking for activities and
30%,
opportunities.
yeah.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
The amount of families that have chosen the e-learning option. And so how can we support those families? And potentially they would be comfortable to come within our space, provided that we've got the programming for them.
Right.
So it's just sort of shifting a little bit and keeping our eye on what matters, which is getting the community access to art.
And removing the barriers.
And removing the barriers. Removing as many barriers as possible, whether it's through video series, whether it's through workshops held outdoors, online book discussion, which we're going to do in November. So all of those things. And then, looking at groups that we may not have really looked at before, like our homeschooling community.
Well, one of the things heard recently in the news, I think it was in the last 24 hours actually, only 70% of the school district of the kids have chosen to actually attend school. And that means 30% have chosen to do the e-learning. With the e-learning though, they may not be choosing to do it through the school district. They may be choosing to do it through a different distance ed. There was one family that was now going to be doing distant ed from Saskatchewan because that was the only place that they could find an actual place, because all of the distant ed programs are so overwhelmed and waitlisted because they didn't have the resources for all of the hundreds of kids that are now showing up. So I think your approach around figuring out how to engage with those distant ed kids, knowing that some of them might not even be accessible through this school district, is going to be your biggest challenge in reaching out and letting them know that you're there to provide an education and removing those boundaries to the art.
Yeah, so that's where we had to sort of scratch our heads, and none of us being homeschoolers were like, well, there must be somewhere where they go to get their information. So Facebook and, you know, calling friends and colleagues of, how can we reach out to them and get the message through?
Now, let's take a step back. If you were to sit back on a Saturday when you're at home, out in the garden, having a cup of tea, where do you hope to be a year from now?
Right here, telling you what an amazing year we've had. And now that we're out of the pandemic, things are great. I mean, when we moved to Campbell River, I worked for Seymour Pacific and Broad Street Properties, and I was there for about 4 years. And that would have been one of my shortest stints. Prior to that, I tend to stay.
Yes.
Because part of my approach is to first listen, to listen and to hold space and to give space to those who are already there. And so that's a lot of what I'm going to be doing for this first little while anyway. I'm not coming in hoping to revolutionize or change in any major way, because there's already some pretty great stuff. So again, back to my fluffing, I'm here to just sort of fluff and ensure that the good work that is being done is getting out there.
Right.
So I definitely see myself still there in a year, just trucking along and hopefully being, a little bit more top of mind for the Campbell River and North Island community. That would be ideal.
Now, in terms of exhibits, you mentioned that there's a planning quite a ways out. So how far out are the exhibits actually already booked?
So we are fully booked for 2022.
Oh.
Yeah. So we've got
Okay.
everything set for 2021 and for the remainder of 2020, which really isn't too much. But
Right.
2021 is already all set.
Okay.
And 2022 is already mostly set, at least the themes and the exhibits. Some of
Okay.
the artists we're still in conversation with.
Right.
But yeah, we're really looking forward to it. We've got some fantastic group shows coming. We're really sort of looking at bringing together artists from BC to work on common themes.
Excellent.
Themes surrounding care, for example. Themes surrounding Sybil Andrews, for example.
Yeah.
So I think Campbell Riverites will really enjoy that.
Right.
One of our upcoming exhibits is in response to Sybil Andrews, and so we're tapping some contemporary artists to respond to some of Sybil's work.
Awesome.
So I think that we've got some really exciting group exhibits coming. We've got a couple great solo exhibits that are also coming, with who we're even already in talks with galleries from across Canada who are interested in touring it or collaborating with us. And so that's really elevating the work that we're doing here in Campbell River.
That's awesome.
Putting us on the map. But it's also just bringing some top quality stuff to our community and to the North Island. And I think that that's just amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
And that is our show.
Fantastic.
It goes by so fast. We could actually dig into that for a whole other show, what you've got coming.
Yeah.
But we'll save that for the next time. Sarah, thank you so much for coming and spending the time with us today. We really appreciate it. And we wish you all the best in the first couple of months of your job.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. You've been watching and listening to eXplore, coming to you from the Tidemark Theatre in the city of Campbell River. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again.